Welcome to another episode of the Virginia Investor Podcast. Today's guest is the one and only Augie Byllott, a real estate investor, educator, national speaker known for his expertise in creative financing and transaction structuring. He's completed over 600 real estate deals and only used a bank twice. That's insane. Augie, I am so excited to have you on the podcast, talk about real estate, but also talk about your work with Chair the Love, an amazing organization. We'll get into those details a little bit later. Thank you for coming on the podcast.
Well, Stephen, I'm so happy to be here. I really am. And I know it sounds like a lot of deals, and you spread it out over enough time, it's not that many deals. They compound, which is what investing is about, isn't it? It's about compounding into our future.
Right. Awesome. Let's learn about how you got started in life.
Sure.
Where were you born and what was childhood like?
I was born in the Bronx, New York.
Really?
And at about age 5, we moved out to Long Island, which was kind of, after the World War II expansion, and probably about 10 or 12, 15 years, something like that. But we moved into a little 3-1 that my parents paid $11,990 for. And it was funny, after my dad passed, we were going through some of his things, and we found their old mortgage book. Their monthly payment was $63 a month. And I remember my mother saying, there were times we struggled to make that.
Really?
So talk about
Holy
affordable
cow.
housing.
Wow.
How things have changed.
That's incredible. When you were growing up, what age did you move out to Long Island, roughly?
First grade. I was about 7 years old, and I was the first of 6 kids.
Wow.
So when we moved out to the island, there was just my brother and myself, and I guess the third one might have been in the oven at that point, or maybe not, but then we eventually moved to a larger house when I was in junior high school.
Got it.
And then I graduated on Long Island, went to college. And
when your parents had you, were they relatively young? I
yes.
guess they had 6 months after.
I was actually born on my mom's 20th birthday.
Wow.
So we always said my dad was by far the most creative gift giver I've ever known.
Wow. So you probably helped raise your siblings.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I was babysitting probably by the age of 8 or 9 years old. And it was good because it was growing up where we got to grow up on Long Island was way better than growing up in New York City at that time. And it also helped me to forge a little bit of an entrepreneurial spirit because when the ice cream man came, as the family kept growing, there was no money for that kind of stuff unless you went out and found a way to earn it yourself. So I sold Kool-Aid and then, graduated to lawn mowing and the paper route and those kinds of things. And it was really helpful.
What did your parents do for a living?
My dad was a banker for 28 years, 30 years, and he ended up taking an early retirement in his mid-50s. Mm-hmm. But he worked 3 jobs until he was 45 years old. Wow. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, with 6 kids. That's a full-time job and a half.
Right.
So mom was a stay-at-home. And my father, well, he was a banker as his primary job. He also worked in credit and collections at nights, and he did some other stuff on weekends. And he was kind of a frustrated entrepreneur a little bit because he tried a laundromat, he bought an ice cream truck, and just different things over the years because, that was an era when affordability, well, you went out and earned it, and you'd get there.
Right.
And it was funny because before he passed, and this is also before my wife and I migrated to Florida, we were on the back of his sailboat. So he came out of Korea. So he fought in Korea. And he and Mom were married before he got drafted. And now this is, fast forward, I'm now, I guess, in my early 40s, mid 40s. And we were on the back of his sailboat. We just had dinner down in the galley. He ended up with a beautiful sailboat. And he says, I love the stuff that you're doing. And I wonder how my life would have turned out had I been willing to take more risk.
Wow, that's powerful.
And I said, Dad, 6 kids? What's a greater risk than that? I have 1 son.
Right.
And it's just an amazing thing that he would look like that. And man, he was an amazing guy. He could fix anything. He could figure out a solution to any problem.
Right.
And even when he went to work on Saturdays, he'd leave me a math problem. Like, here's a circle, and inside the circle is a square, and inside the square is a triangle, and I want you to tell me what is the area of different parts of this drawing.
That's awesome.
And so I'd sit there till noon when he got home, and but sometimes I'd have the answer, sometimes not.
Yeah. That's incredible, and it says a lot about your father too, the hustle, and your mother for the job and a half she had, multiple jobs she had. But that's awesome. Were you involved in sports or more academics or more just having a good time?
No, a little of everything. I played baseball, I played basketball, and I played soccer because I wasn't big enough to play football. And I really enjoyed soccer. I ended up later in life coaching youth soccer for about 10 years and ended up the president of the soccer club. It was a wonderful opportunity, and I was glad when somebody else was able to enjoy that wonderful opportunity after me. But it was a great experience. We had about 1,000 kids in the program.
Wow.
And we used to do a tournament every year called Hop Hog Helping Hands. So this was on Long Island. And we'd raise money, and we'd find 3 families that had a hardship that year, and we'd share the wealth, and it was a good thing.
Yeah.
And it was great growing up on Long Island. I had a lot of friends and bicycles and a lot of freedom and flexibility that I don't think kids today always get to enjoy because it's a little bit more cloistered environment.
Right. When you were growing up, your father was a hustler, your mom was taking care of all the kids.
Yep.
Did you have any insight into financial investing or financial freedom or anything like that? Or was it go to school, go to college, and get a job?
That was it. And it was interesting because my generation was the first of any of our ancestors to even go to college. And nobody talked about money unless they were saying rich people are crooks. Mm-hmm. It was the traditional stuff. Money doesn't grow on trees. Rich people had to do something crooked to get their money. And it was financial ignorance more than anything else, especially with my grandparents. They were second generation immigrants. And so they struggled. They lived in the Bronx and, relatively poor areas. And, my dad was the first one to break out of that, really. Mm-hmm. And they were the first ones on either side of the family to own their own home. And so it showed me some things. And I became entrepreneurial because I realized that if I was willing to hustle, I never had to worry. And right. It's funny, I spoke yesterday at Dealmaker, and many of them, I know your listeners are Dealmaker folks. And one of the things that I mentioned was the fact that as a young kid, from the time of probably age 10 forward, I never, ever felt poor. And yet we probably were, or at least we got by. We always ate and we had a roof over our head, but there wasn't a whole lot left over. Right. And because I was able to either sell Kool-Aid or right. I would collect, deposit bottles and bring them back for the money or whatever I could do,
right.
I always had a, few dollars in my pocket, and that never made, I always felt like I had capacity.
Do you feel like that entrepreneurship was sort of like driven by accomplishment or driven by getting money or driven by the need to feel secure with money? What do you think drove that entrepreneurship spirit that you had?
More that I didn't want to feel like I was a burden on the family. Okay. I didn't like to have to ask for things and be told no. That was one thing. And I didn't want to put my parents in an uncomfortable situation. I knew that they were doing the best they could.
Right.
And it was something that I guess I appreciated at a relatively young age. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't always easy either, because my dad was a tough taskmaster. Right. I was the firstborn, and I was expected to get it right. And then I had to be an example for my siblings. Mm-hmm. That was the toughest burden I ever carried.
Right.
Because as a kid, man, I had loads of questions, but I didn't have many answers.
Right.
And so with him being away at work as much as he was, it was a lot of figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I didn't figure it out right. And he was not afraid of corporal punishment.
Right.
And so, I got my butt whipped more than once. But it helped me to grow and develop discipline over time.
Right.
And it took a long time because I hated discipline in the beginning because all it meant was I was going to get, a SWAT. But eventually I learned that if I could make discipline my servant rather than my master, mm-hmm. it would serve me well.
Right.
And that took a long time to sink in. But when it did, it was very transformative.
Yeah, that's definitely a thought for a more mature person. But you look back in hindsight and you realize that upbringing and that accountability is incredible. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's an incredible strength and advantage that you had where it didn't feel like it at all at the time, I'm sure. Where'd you go to college?
Long Island University, CW
Okay.
Post campus on Long
Okay.
Island.
How far away from home is that?
It was about 45 miles, 40 miles.
Okay.
And so I commuted my freshman and most of my sophomore year. And then I joined a fraternity and got to shack up with some of my fraternity
Awesome.
brothers. And then as a fraternity member, I got a job in the local bar as a bartender
Nice.
because it was kind of a legacy.
Yep.
And that was another interesting experience.
more social
yes,
lessons.
Yes. And it's funny because, we didn't talk about it yet, and we'll probably get to it, but I did spend part of my life between my corporate career and my full-time investing career in ministry.
Okay.
And as a bartender, you hear more confessions between 2 and 4 a.m. than the average parish priest.
I would bet.
And actually, I got to grant some absolution, too, to help people feel better about themselves and say, look, it can be better tomorrow.
Yeah.
So it was an interesting experience.
That's great. That's awesome. Yeah, so you're going to college. Do you have any specific ambitions in college? Do you know, hey, when I get
Yeah.
out of college, I want to do this, and that's what I'm going to do?
Well, yeah, I wanted to be a music teacher, and
Okay.
I majored in 2 very unrelated subjects, music education and economics.
Interesting.
And this was the Vietnam era.
Okay.
This was the early 70s, and there were no teaching jobs when I got out. But by then, I was also a professional musician. I was a trumpet player, and I worked with some really great musicians back then. So between music and tending bar, I mean, I was living like
That's a
the
good
life,
life.
a Disney life
Right.
for a young man. It was wonderful. It was nonstop fun.
Right.
And then as I got a little older, I got engaged to be married, and I said, well, I can't keep doing this lifestyle because it's just not conducive to,
Right.
a good relationship. But college was great. I joined a fraternity, and, a lot of people scoff at fraternities, especially because you got to subject yourself to sometimes a little bit of abuse because you get broken down and rebuilt.
Right.
But our fraternity was amazing, and it was a real character builder. These were guys of integrity, and some of them were older. Some of my pledge brothers were younger or the same age, and I still carry many of those friendships today, more than 50 years later.
Yeah, that's
So
incredible.
it's an amazing thing.
What was your ambition after college? What were you studying? Well, you said
Well, it was music mostly.
it was music
Yeah,
mostly.
music, and then the bar business. I wanted to be kind of a bar owner, and eventually I did open a bar.
Okay.
And when I finally opted to leave that business, I had a partner, and the partnership dissolved. I then had to find something new to do, and I ended up doing something I said I would never do.
Corporate.
Because I went corporate, exactly right. And I had said, I don't want to follow in my dad's footsteps. I don't want to work 3 jobs ever. I don't want to, I don't want to be a banker. I don't want to do that 9-to-5 thing. And I ended up getting a job with Chase Manhattan Bank at the absolute lowest rung on the ladder. And I was well behind a lot of my peers at that point because I had been doing all
That's
this
right.
other cool
Yeah,
stuff.
that's right, yeah.
But now I'm in my, mid-upper 20s. And the cool thing was I was able to embrace it. I went into sales, and probably within the first couple of months, I figured out a whole new way to price the product we sold in the marketplace.
Interesting.
It improved our float position. It allowed the bank to leverage deposits and capital in ways they hadn't done it before. And this is, I was the new kid on the block, but, I just had learned a lot doing things, even playing poker translated into banking pretty well.
Right.
The way, you manage your money on the table, you can also manage your deposits.
Right.
If not by gambling,
Yeah.
per se, I didn't put the bank in the gambling business, but I could see relationships mathematically with money, and that was really helpful for me. And that's just something I had since I was a little kid. I was good in math, and it was just something I always enjoyed. And I think part of it was the fact that those crazy math problems my father gave me.
That's what I was thinking,
you
yeah.
know? And I never thought about it quite that way until we just spoke about it. But that gave me an affinity for numbers, and that was really helpful in what I was doing in the banking industry. And so while I started late, I was able to accelerate a little faster than some of my contemporaries.
There is an argument that like your mid-20s, early 20s, like even though you should, in theory, go out in the workforce and start working and get ahead, there's so much of development in those years that you can make. And then you do get started a little bit later and you can still catch up. Like you just need a couple of years, but you'll catch up at a faster pace.
Yes.
It's interesting because the way you're talking about the relationships with money and how things work, my brain immediately goes to the relationship of the numbers in the space of those math problems that your dad laid out. Because you have to figure out how all these work in different areas and what they're sort of like the differences in space between each of them and sizes and how they all fit in together and stuff like that before you came home. And now this is you trying to work a different sort of problem, but to figure out where the money goes and how it all sits and flows and stuff like that. So.
And it was funny, I didn't realize that some of what I was learning in that banking experience was actually preparing me for some of the real estate stuff that I would do later in life.
Right.
Because I was in the credit card business on the merchant side of the business.
Okay.
So we would basically purchase their paper, which it was back then, now it's all digital,
Right.
but it still kind of works the same way. And we would purchase their transactions at a discount.
Interesting.
I love buying discounted paper
Right.
today,
Right.
Because it gives me a better yield. And
Right.
that's exactly what the bank did. And, I do it on a smaller scale. I'm not doing it in the billions, but I do okay. I don't complain.
Right. How long was it for you until you found real estate? So how long were you in corporate and then?
Well,
and then
I
how did you
started in
find-
banking in 1979, okay? And so I didn't buy my first property until I was, I guess it was about 1985,
Okay.
okay? And I had actually saved up my first down payment. I had gone through a divorce in 1983. And so I met a buddy of mine who happened to have his own house at that point, and he had a 4-bedroom house. And he said, yeah, and I rent out bedrooms to other guys.
Awesome.
House hacking. What a concept, And so I moved in. It cost me $100 a week for a room. And they had a Thursday night poker game. And I didn't have any money because when I got divorced, I left basically everything behind, so that it was an amicable, separation, but it was
Still
unfortunate.
costly.
But still, yeah. And so all I had was my paycheck at that point in time. I was paying child support. And so I wanted my son and my ex-wife to be okay. And so it took me a while. He kept offering, I'll loan you some money to play with us on Thursday nights. And I said, no, I never gamble borrowed money. I'll gamble my own and lose it if need be, but I will not go in hot gambling. And so anyway, these guys were kind enough to wait until I saved up enough money to sit at the table. And then about 2 years later, they had given me a down payment for a house.
Wow. That's a good way to get it.
It wasn't a big down payment,
Right.
but it ended up being how I bought my first house.
Yeah.
And it was interesting. I learned something about negotiating on that deal because my son's godmother's boyfriend at the time was a real estate broker. And we got within $3,000 on the purchase of this house. And I was not budging a nickel higher, and they were not coming a step lower. And so the broker says to me, Aug, how much furniture do you have to move into the house? I said, I have a 15-inch TV and I have a cassette radio. And that was pretty much, because remember, I rented a furnished bedroom. Right? And so he says, what if we could get all the furniture in the house? Would it be worth it to you to pay the extra $3,000? I said, I guess it would, because it was a 4-bedroom house.
Right.
And he went to the seller and said, didn't you guys tell me that you're moving to Arizona? Yes. Well, how much is it going to cost to move all that furniture to Arizona? Oh, like $6,000 or $7,000. He said, if I could get you that additional $3,000 and you didn't have to pay $6,000 to move your furniture, could that difference buy you brand new furniture in Arizona?
Right.
They said, it probably could. So I ended up, the day we closed, I stopped at 7-Eleven. I picked up a 6-pack of Coca-Cola and some chips, and I hung my clothes in the closet, turned on the TV, and I was home.
That is awesome. That is great. And that's a great lesson, too. You don't meet on price, win on terms.
Exactly.
That's awesome.
Exactly. So it was my first semi-terms
That's great.
deal,
Yeah.
and I didn't even know what it was at the time. And then I became an accidental landlord.
That is great. Did you rent out rooms or anything like that?
Here's what I did. Because my son would be with me on weekends, I didn't want to have somebody else living in the house, but it had a full basement, which we converted into an apartment, which I was able to rent, and that cut my mortgage payment in half. And why that was important, this was like 1985, my first rate, my interest rate, unlike my parents', which I think was 3%, mine was 14%. I had good credit, and it was from a bank.
Yeah.
Those were the days when we had, rates went up as high as 18% at one point. And so I got to refinance about 2 years later, down to 10%, thought I died and went to heaven. But we created this 1-bedroom apartment. It reduced my expenses, and it worked out really well.
That is awesome.
But I was kind of an accidental landlord to start.
Yeah, that's great. So now you're house hacking. You own your own property.
Right.
Good. So you're back on your feet. You're good to go.
Yeah.
You are still in the corporate world. You're still in
Yes.
Banking.
In the credit card business, yes.
Okay. And is that what opened your eyes to, hey, I could do this on more properties? Or how did that transition happen?
The way that came about was I started a new job with Citibank.
Okay.
I was with Chase previously, and now I go to Citibank. And I meet this lovely lady, and you've met her, my wife Audrey. And she also had a house, only she bought her house probably 5 years before I did. And she had a really nice low interest rate. And she had her brother put an apartment in for her downstairs, so she split the house. And she's got a girl staying with her in one of the bedrooms.
Perfect.
She's cash flow positive.
Yeah.
She makes like $200 a month living in a house where she sleeps. And I said, wow, getting paid to sleep. That is the bomb.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening is, we fell in love. We got engaged. We got married. And in that period, I have a brother who became a general contractor.
Okay.
And he was renting a house at the time. He was newly married. And his landlord owned about 9 acres, something like that. And he and my father was always thinking, they cut a deal with her. My father called it a vendee plan, okay, where the seller will get paid every time a lot sells. They paid for the subdivision. My brother built like 18 homes, and my brother's comp was the last lot. Now, how do you finance it? Well, my father came up with participation certificates. Okay, this is a private lending deal. Who even knew what it was at the time?
Awesome.
And this is back in the mid 80s.
Right.
And so I reached out to a lot of my friends and I said, hey, you can make 15% on your money if you're interested. And we ended up raising a bunch of cash. He was able to put in roads, put up the bond, and then as each lot would sell, they would, the buyer would get a mortgage to build, right? And then it would convert, to a regular mortgage. And at that point, when the lot sold, the owner of the land got paid, and he had the funds to build. And so they completed that subdivision. Everybody got paid what they were supposed to get. And then my brother says, you got to sell this house. Because then Audrey and I, we got married. We bought our first house, remodeled it, phenomenal, and the market tanked 20%.
Wow.
So 7 years we stayed in our first house. And we were fortunate when we put it on the market, we were going to buy this other property and subdivide it and do like my brother did. We were going to build a bunch of houses. Our comp was going to be a 6,000 square foot house built in 1864 on Long Island. Okay?
Wow.
On this, what was a beautiful estate. And after we got it inspected, the deal died. But we had put our house on the market and it sold. So now Audrey and I were about to become homeless.
Right.
And so we were looking for a particular type of property, and we ended up buying a property that had that special sign on it, bank foreclosure. But it was the worst house in an amazing neighborhood.
Which is what you're looking for.
And we spent 2.5 years renovating it.
Interesting. Wow.
And we sold it. And this was in the 90s, and the tax law had just changed so that you didn't have to reinvest your profits in order to not have a taxable gain.
Mm-hmm.
So as a married couple, we could take up to a $500,000 capital gain on our primary residence that we live in at least 2 years, tax-free. That still exists. And we ended up doing that. Major windfall allowed me to retire and go into ministry full-time. But that was, we did a couple of those, and then we eventually came to Florida when we were ready to retire. But we had set a goal when Audrey and I got married. We were both in our mid-30s at that time. And we said, we pulled the plug at 50. We want to be able to retire at 50.
Mm-hmm.
And then I learned when I retired at 50 that God has no desire for me to retire.
Right.
And retirement for me would be torture.
For sure. Yeah,
And
absolutely.
That was really kind of the way we got our start. Accidental landlord, worst house, best area, next house, same kind of thing. And it was only like 1.5 miles away.
Mm-hmm.
And we had the same experience.
So you went into ministry, and I assume during ministry you continued doing real estate deals.
Yeah, not as much, because that was in New York, but I had enough money in the market the stock market. We had kept our rental. We converted our 2 original homes to duplex rentals. So we had 4 tenants. Found out we were terrible landlords. Eventually said we got to get out of this business. It's really bad.
Yeah.
But the last year that I was in corporate America, the last 2 years actually, I was in seminary at the same time at night. And so I was consecrated a deacon after doing a year's internship, and I served in a 350-bed nursing home as part of the pastoral care team, and I was also part of the chaplaincy department in a inner city hospital. And that was an amazing experience. And when I came to Florida, that's what I thought I was going to be doing, was ministry in a hospital. I actually went through 6 months of arduous interviews, because this was also the time when a lot of televangelists and whatnot had gotten in a lot of hot water.
Right.
And so getting a job in ministry, it would have been easy to go to work for the CIA.
Right.
And so it was a very grueling process. And I ended up not doing that. Even though I got hired, we moved to Florida and I went to a real estate seminar.
Right.
And I started seeing things that some I liked, some I didn't, but there were some creative ideas. And then I saw if I took some of what I knew about finance, I could probably help a lot of people.
Right.
And so instead of serving in the church in a congregation type capacity or even a pastoral capacity, God said, no, you're taking off the collar, because I wore a collar back then. Okay. And I was with the in the Lutheran church at the time. And so I was kind of able to hide behind that collar. And I don't say that in a disparaging way, but I wanted people to know why I was talking about God, and not be offed by it. And now, obviously, I've grown even more in my faith, but my church became the world.
Right.
And, I have a home church now where we are in Florida. I have another home church in Hawaii where we spend a fair amount of time. And, the Lord has just treated us so, we have been so blessed. It's absurd. But it was really funny now that I can look back over the last 20 some odd years and see how my steps were actually being ordered.
Right.
When I didn't see it. I didn't even know why I was doing half of what I was doing.
Yeah.
I went to Florida with the purpose of doing part-time ministry, fishing, and golfing. And I haven't golfed now in probably 2.5 years. In 22 years, I've gone fishing twice, but we did 600 transactions. I've trained thousands and thousands of investors. I started this thing called the $1 Billion Challenge, where I try to teach people to appreciate abundance and sharing that abundance, because you can't outgive God. But it seems like the more I give, the more God enables me to give.
Right.
And that has been a real transformational thing, even in my real estate business.
Right.
Because in the beginning, how much money can I make on this deal? And that became, how can I help this family get out of a situation or into a situation on both sides of the transaction?
Right. So I assume so you jump into real estate in Florida, you're doing creative deals. I assume like all kinds of different creative deals across the board, but the bottom line is just creating win-win situations.
Yeah. And I'm a huge fan of Stephen Covey.
Okay.
Second only to the Bible, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People is one of the greatest books ever written. I mean, there's a load of great books out there. But the first 3 habits is self-mastery. And self-mastery is a really tough business because it forces you to be brutally honest. To look in the mirror and not say, oh, my hair looks really good, but to really look into your own eyes and see what's looking back at you.
Right.
For some people, it's an awkward experience.
Right.
But the better you get at doing that, the more you master yourself, then it's about mastering relationships, interrelationship skills. And then, obviously, the 7th habit is sharpening the saw. It's always getting better, always seeking. Somebody once said, and I don't recall who it was, but this line has always stuck with me. Make today your signature day. Okay? At the end of that day, you're going to sign it.
Awesome.
And present it to whoever you respect the most and say, this was today. And making every day your signature day means every day is going to be better than the previous day. And it's not that you're going to do such great things, but the things that you do are going to be to the best of your ability.
Right.
and with the greatest heart of service.
Right. It's interesting because just talking to you, I can see different traits. I can't put it like a pinpoint it, but I can see different traits of why you would be so successful. Just your attitude, your mindset in general, and kind of the different way that you come to things, like arrive at things, which would lead me to believe that like how you arrived at different solutions, and you do care, you genuinely care about other people and their success, which surrounds you and your whole reputation from everything that I know. But what do you think allowed you, because obviously we're not going to touch every 600 deals and all these different things, but like what do you think made you successful where a lot of other people either don't even make the, maybe they don't take action, they don't make the first move, but how do you get to 600 deals in your real estate investing career?
The one thing I learned about marketing, and because when I first started out, I wouldn't answer the phone because I was so good in my banking career and I was pretty effective in my ministry career, and then I get into this real estate thing. And now I'm like a neophyte because the house hacking stuff and, you know, buying the worst house in the best neighborhood, that's not what we did in Florida. We did obviously some of that because we flipped a lot of houses and we had a lot of rentals. But I had never had to market my own business before. And now, in my other experiences in life, I was the expert.
Right.
Now I'm no longer the expert. And so if people ask me questions I can't answer, I'm going to be embarrassed.
Right.
And yesterday I talked about, you know, one of our greatest enemies is fear. Mm-hmm. And what does God tell us in Scripture? Be bold and courageous. I'm with you wherever you are. No worries. And it took a while for that to sink in, I have to be honest. And so what started to move the needle in our business was when, after reading probably for the second time, The 7 Habits, and I probably for a decade I read it at least once a year. And the idea of win-win or no deal took over my profit orientation, okay? Because that was about me win, and if you did too, that's great, and if you didn't, that's your tough luck. And win-win or no deal truly became the only way I would do business. If the only way I could do business with you was going to be toxic to you, I was out, okay? Or we'd figure out another way to do it. And there were times that I had to walk away, and in many times, I didn't buy the property. I showed them how they could keep their property, how they could change their finances, how they could manage their money differently, how they could restructure their debt. And they were grateful. And quite often, I would get referrals. Referrals helped me grow my business more than anything else. And every now and then, I'll still get a call from somebody. You bought my friend's house, 12 years ago. Oh, my goodness. And it's just crazy. And that has been a huge thing. And even now, you were at the event with Dealmaker, and everybody I ran into that wanted to help share the love, I said, here's my card. On the back is a QR code. I want you to invite 5 of your friends. Since you're supporting us, invite them. Say, hey, I support Share the Love. You should do it too. It's really a meaningful thing. And on the back of that card is a QR code. Because people will say, yeah, I'd like to do that. Because I'm trying to get 100,000 people to donate $18 a month. It's not a lot of money. And I'd love for their kids, to donate 50 cents of that $18. So the kids start to learn about generosity, about serving people you may never meet, but making their lives better. And the bottom line of that is if somebody says, yeah, I'll do that, great. Here's the QR code, point your phone at it, do it right now. Because it's easy to forget.
Right.
It's easy to have a good intention,
right,
and yet no follow through.
Right.
So I've found the greatest way to make people successful is remove their excuses.
Yeah.
And when I deal with sellers or buyers, I want to remove their excuses too, because they're afraid. They will lie to themselves. They will lie to you. They'll believe, any kind of baloney they tell themselves, and that's not always helpful.
Right.
And what I really have gotten off on, which I think has really contributed, is the fact that we would be able to buy creatively, and that would allow us to sell creatively.
Interesting.
And, if I could buy a property with seller financing and then wrap that note and sell it, but first I'll do a lease option. Because why would I do a lease option? I'm going to do that lease option because if you pay on time for 24 months, I will finance you. If you miss a payment, the clock restarts. Because I want to know that I'm not going to have issues down the road with somebody who chooses or cannot perform.
Right.
So I want people to know that your first responsibility every month is that mortgage payment.
Right.
So if you're paying your rent on time, the odds of you paying your mortgage on time are good.
Right.
So a lot of the deals that I've done resulted in seller financing on the other side of the transaction. So not only do I typically get my price without having to negotiate a whole lot, if they've been in the house 2 years and love it, do I have inspection worries? No, because a lot of home inspectors, with great respect, for many of them, but a lot of them are professional deal killers.
Right.
And most of their issues are supposition. Well, this could happen, or at this age, it may or may not last another 5 or 10 or 15 years. Mm-hmm. They don't have a crystal ball, but they're scaring the daylights out of some poor buyers going, oh my God, this is going to be terrible.
Yeah.
And so we try to keep it good for people.
Yeah.
And so they get to experience the neighborhood, they get to experience the property. And when we're ready to pull the trigger, sometimes, depending on which way the market is going, they've even got a bunch of equity by the time we close.
Right.
Because the value's gone up. Mm-hmm. And that makes me more comfortable as the guy lending.
Right.
Because now I've got, a lower loan to value.
That's awesome. It's such a cool setup. And I could just imagine over the years of you kind of just getting really good at this and doing it over and over and over again and seeing different contingencies and kind of how all the different ways you can structure deals. I would just imagine it would be the wealth of knowledge that you have in your brain right now is just unbelievable. What would you say to someone who is scared to take action?
If you like where you are, that's fine. And, I said it yesterday, where every single one of us on this planet is at this moment is the result of all the choices that we've made up to this moment. If you love the life that you've got, keep making the choices the same way. But if you want a different outcome, you have the freedom to make a different choice.
Right.
And I'm telling you, if you read Joshua, Jeremiah, they are all very encouraging words to be found in those scriptures. And they're not my words, they're God's words. And I think it's Jeremiah 29:11. He says, I'm not here to harm you. I'm here to give you hope and a future. And then Joshua, I think it's 1:9, is be strong and courageous, for I am with you. Man, if you've got that behind you, I don't care if you're a person of faith or not. That's God. You're made in his image, whether you believe in him or not. I don't care. Yeah. And with that in our corner, there's nothing we cannot accomplish. I mean, Jesus says that later on in the New Testament, but those things are so encouraging. And also, if you're new and afraid to take action, maybe you need to find someone who is more seasoned than you and bring them in and think from an abundance mentality and say, I don't have to make all the money. Let me work with someone like a Stephen or your dad or lots of other people we know in this community that are honest and reputable people, and split the deal with them.
Right.
Because you're going to get the best education possible. And even, if you have a good deal, there's a ton of people that will loan you money.
Right.
And the other thing, working with good private lenders or even hard money lenders, they're going to vet your deal because they're not going to put money into a bad deal. Yeah. And you will learn from them as well. And when you have the property inspected, go with the inspector. Be right over their shoulder. Yeah. All these things can help to reduce your fear and elevate your knowledge base, because knowledge builds competence, and competence builds confidence. Okay? And 2 mantras that I always taught my students. One is always, always play full out, okay? Which means to be present in every conversation. Don't be the guy doing all the talking, because when you're talking, you're not learning, okay? You may be pontificating, but I've seen a lot of guys that pontificate fall off their soapbox and break their neck.
Right.
Okay? And so listening is when we're learning. The other thing is what I call the T principle. Every trainer I've ever heard says, take action, take action, take action. I don't entirely agree. But if you're not taking action, I would encourage you to take effective action. That's the TEA, take effective action. Okay? Learn about due diligence. You can make an offer, you can make 100 offers, Just because you make the offers, if somebody accepts it, so what? You've got the right to inspect the property. You have not put yourself at undue risk. And you've got a 10-day inspection period. During that period, you should go to a bunch of meetups. And I know here in the Richmond area, man, this is Meetup Central, and there's a bunch of great ones, super people. And you will go to that meetup, I guarantee, if you stand up and say, I'm new at this, I just put a property under contract, I think it's a good deal, who would like half of it? Because I want somebody who knows their stuff, and I'm interviewing prospective partners, and I want to know why you're the guy or gal I should work with.
That's perfect.
Now, what about putting it in on those terms? Let people bid to help you.
That is awesome. That's
okay.
That's great.
Make it a deal,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
But you're not just going out there saying, please, please, please help me. You're not begging. You're making an offer. Just like I've never asked people to loan me money, but I have offered people an opportunity to get in on a deal that can improve the results they're getting on their investment capital. Okay, for those of you that want to get private money, I'll give you a very free tip right now. My favorite question, and these are the exact words I use. What are you doing right now to get great returns on your investment capital? You'll be shocked how many people say, I'm not getting great returns on my investment capital. I'm scared of the market. It's high. The economy is faltering. I don't know what's going to happen. Well, gee, what if you could get a reasonable return that's backed by hard assets and puts you in a really safe position? Is that something you want to talk about, or maybe not? The maybe not, that's called the takeaway clause.
Takeaway
and you know
clause.
that, right? Yo, I want to talk about it. Well, I can't do it right now.
Right.
We need to meet for coffee.
Right.
And why do you need to meet for coffee? Because I want your undivided attention. Mm-hmm. And we need 30 to 45 minutes without interruption. And even when they come to that meeting, I'm going to confirm. We're going to need 30 to 45 minutes. Do you have that much time? And if you say no, it's okay. We'll reschedule.
Yeah, I love it. That's all. It's you're setting the rules. You're putting it out there.
Yes,
I like it.
Yes, and I set the rules not just for my benefit, but for their benefit.
100%. Yep.
Okay, because if they can give me 100% attention, I'm going to be able to help them pre-screen me and pre-screen the deal, and I get to pre-screen them.
Yeah.
Because I've also fired lenders in the past. You know, I've had people that like wanted to do a colonoscopy on my deal. You know, and once I start, private lender, if you're getting your payments on time, do not bother me. I have work to do, right? And so that helps us to be more effective. So it's not just action, but effective action. It will be transformative, because action can waste a lot of time, spin our wheels, burn our energy.
Right. That's cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to get into, I know we have limited time. I want to get into Chair the Love. I want to be sure that we're talking about that, going into that. As we close, we'll get back quickly into another real estate question. But my next question for you is, leading into the Chair the Love work that you're doing, what's your take on legacy?
Well, I'm a big believer in exit strategies. Okay, and when I first started thinking about legacy, I realized the way most of us think about legacy, you have to die to leave it. And death is such a bad exit strategy. You know, I mean, I'm happy. I think I'm going to go to heaven. I hope I'm going to go to heaven. But I'm not in a big hurry. I don't want to go like tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, unless God's
Take
ready
your
for
time.
it. If God wants me tomorrow,
Right.
I'm there. I'm all in. But if that's not the case, I want to live my legacy every day, because I've thought about legacy a lot. And even when you leave legacies, you're pouring into the next generation. Mm-hmm. But why wait and give it after the fact when you could be doing it today? And I love pouring into people. We had dinner with some friends last night. Good friend of mine who's in the self-storage business, Kevin Reynolds is his name. And his two sons are amazing young men. They did a thing after we finished dinner. We were sitting around the table chatting, and they each shared something they thought about my wife and myself. And we ended up doing it with them too, because I had never gone through this exercise before. Mm-hmm. But the one son said, we were on a real estate cruise with them earlier this year, and first time I met the boys. And he said, one thing you said will really stick with me. And I kind of looked at him, wow, you know? And He said, "You said to my brother and me, I have a vested interest in your success." And I do. I sincerely do. And it's because I want them to live the best lives that they can. And I want them to live with intention, with a sense of purpose, because that's where joy comes from. My life has been so fulfilling, and it's grown more fulfilling every single day. And I have not been bored or depressed. I get frustrated once in a while when things don't go fast enough, but I feel so blessed. And I want other people to have that same feeling, because being born here in the United States, we have no idea how blessed we truly are unless we get out and see the third and developing world. And, I showed a slide yesterday of a girl in Uganda with hydrocephalus. Her head is like almost double the size her head should be, and that's because there's water in there that expanded her skull as a baby. And we don't even have that in our country anymore because they can do in vitro surgery. They don't have that, in Africa. Or if they do, poor people can't ever think about affording it. And in many of these countries, a public hospital could take you 2 years to get into.
Wow.
And a private hospital is way more than people can afford. And yeah, I know our healthcare here isn't perfect, but it's light years ahead of the rest of the world. And so, it's a powerful thing. And when he said, you have a vested interest in our success, I just found that flabbergasting. I said, but it's true, I do. And obviously, I want you to do so well that you can pour your excess, your overflow, into doing good work. Supporting things, whether it's Share the Love or something else that is important to you. I mentioned the $1 billion challenge before. About 15 years ago, I was doing a lot of education and training for investors. I had a coaching program and all that, mastermind, that kind of stuff. And to teach people the concept of abundance, I said, I want you to do so well that you can give $100 a week to the charity of your choice. Because when I get 10,000 investors doing that, that's $1 million a week. And $1 million a week is $50 million a year. And in 20 years, we gift $1 billion. Now, that was before Share the Love. And when Share the Love came into the picture, obviously I got much more narrow in my focus. But still, if something's important to you and it's not Share the Love, I get it. But what I love about Share the Love, and what Share the Love is, I don't even think I've described it for your listeners yet, but we provide the gift of mobility to people who have neither the means financially nor the access, because you just can't get a wheelchair. And these are people, in some cases, that have waited. We had a record in October when we were in Oaxaca, Mexico. We gave a woman a wheelchair that's crawled on her knees for 75 years. It was her first wheelchair.
Wow.
So we've done it for people with 20 years, 30 years, 7 years, 10 years. Unbelievable. And when you can do this kind of stuff and get that immediate impact, for me being an entrepreneur, I want to see results. And I don't want to see them in 20 years. I want to see them today. Well, when you pick somebody up off the ground and you put them in their first wheelchair, you have changed their life in the amount of time it takes to snap your fingers. And that is a huge, powerful thing. And I've gotten to witness miracles of people. And so the work that we do is super powerful. Folks can find us at Share the Love, and that's chair, not share, chair, CHAIR, thelove.org. And if I can share one quick story, I met this young man in Kenya 4 years ago. His name's Peter. And Peter had been in a motor scooter accident, because they have these 100cc bikes. And that's the primary modes of transportation for people that actually have transportation. And he was a young married guy, 2 little boys, gets in an accident, spinal cord injury, paralyzed from the waist down. Before I met him, he spent the 2 previous years in bed. His older brother brought him to the wheelchair distribution. Peter gets a wheelchair. Thank you very much. This is wonderful. But boy, this guy was very depressed. He felt his life no longer had meaning. Because I'm sure he was a macho young man, a good-looking guy, and Peter just didn't see he had any future, even with the wheelchair. And he met another guy named Wilson, who became a friend. Wilson's been in a wheelchair since 1989, but he didn't have a wheelchair the first 20 years of his life, and he was one of these people that crawled. Wilson's now probably in his late 50s, early 60s. And Wilson got a wheelchair the following year. Okay, so we have 4 years ago, now 3 years ago, Peter comes to see me and say hello because we kind of bonded. So we talk on WhatsApp, we talk on Facebook Messenger, and we kind of became friends. And then it's become more than that. I mean, I love this young man. And Wilson came with Peter to the next distribution, and he wasn't on the list to get a chair. I said, Wilson, if somebody doesn't show, you will get that wheelchair. Okay? Because I believe you show up, you get. You don't show, can't help you. Okay? And so Wilson ends up getting a wheelchair. And at the end of the distribution, we had 3 people that were going to come up to basically give a testimony what the wheelchair means. And, they wanted to say thank you, and our hosts were, encouraging this. Wilson gets to the front of the room, and he says, I got my first wheelchair in 1989. And because of that wheelchair, it changed my life. I got to go to church. I met this woman in church. Oh, I fell in love. She married me. She's the mother of my 2 sons. And because of that wheelchair, I was able to work. And because I could work, I could save a little money. I was able to start my own business. And I support my family.
Wow.
Now, this was a guy who was crawling in the street.
Yeah.
And to tell that story, that testimony, I mean, even relaying it now, the hair on the back of my neck stands up. And Wilson kind of became a mentor to Peter.
Wow.
It gets better. This past January, Peter was elected to public office as the county representative for people with disabilities. He's become a prolific writer, and he gets out and wrestles with politicians saying, you need to recognize that disability does not mean inability.
Right.
And holy cow.
Yeah.
Both of these guys now, they I'm not looking for a handout. I'm looking for a hand up. And it was so interesting listening to Wilson's testimony because he was so indignant, and his chest was bursting with pride, but not pride like you owe me. It's pride that you gave me the shot.
Right.
Thank you, because I took that shot, and look at what I was able to do with it. And continue doing what you're doing, because you don't know the capabilities and capacity. Just because I don't have legs that work. Yeah. I've got a heart, I've got a mind, I've got a voice, and I've got dreams and goals just like everyone else.
That's so powerful. It's such a powerful mission to be on. I know my father has been on a number of trips, and you guys go all around the world to countries, to developing and third world countries.
Yeah, he's been with us in South America, Central America, Asia,
Africa.
Oh, he's got Africa, and now he's going to Asia.
Yeah, Philippines.
Next week we go to the Philippines. So we're so excited.
So and he almost got me on that one. If I wasn't traveling, right, I probably would be on board with going to the Philippines.
We'll get you soon enough.
Yeah,
we'll get you.
Yeah, I'll get hooked in.
And your listeners should know. If you go to sharethelove.org, click on the distributions link, it'll show you everywhere we're going, and I'm inviting you all to come along. Mm-hmm. Okay? We charge people what it costs us. We don't mark up the trips, but it's a humanitarian adventure. You get to do great work, stay in 4- and 5-star hotels. We eat great food. We have in-country hosts that take very good care of us. We travel typically in air-conditioned motor coaches, and like in Africa, we even go on safari. So it's a humanitarian adventure. So it's an amazing experience.
Yeah, it's life-changing.
Yeah.
I mean, for the Share the Love participants, like organizers, it's life-changing, and it's life-changing for the people receiving wheelchairs.
You bet.
I remember my father told me a story about how they were collecting boxes to throw them away after unboxing the wheelchairs at one of these trips. And
we thought they were going to throw them away.
Yeah, you're right. It was the locals were picking them up, and then it was either Jim or my dad had asked, "Hey, what are you guys doing with the boxes?" And they said, "This is basically going to be their beds." Like
we're going to sleep on them. Yeah, because it's better than the concrete.
Just unbelievable. And you talk earlier. I mean, the amount, like the perspective you have about living in America and what we have in America is just incredible. Especially with like giving what you're doing and the way you're serving now is unbelievable. For years, I worked within a veteran nonprofit, and it was empowering wounded veterans. And so these are people that triple amputees, double amputees, like it had been blown up and have all these disabilities, right? Missing arms and legs. And they are, like you put it, they're strapping young men that like have a whole life ahead of them, that are physically fit and ready to get after it. And then their arms are blown off, their legs are blown off, or both, or whatever. And they naturally will, not, of course, not all of them, but some of them will think life is over. And what we would do as a group, instead of just their organizations that send them clothing with their logos and send them, whatever, we would take these guys and put them through an indoctrination, meaning they had to come and make sure they were physically capable to get through this indoctrination.
Right.
And we would make them go through a very hard selection process. Once they made it through the selection process, we would then travel with them all around the nation, and we would be with them to assist them if needed to get through very grueling endurance events. And the media coverage on that then would then spread, and other people who were missing arms and legs would see it, and it would empower wounded veterans. So it wasn't just handouts and helping.
Right.
It was completely empowering them to continue living their life and to know that life is not over after they get blown up or have amputee, stuff like that. So it's a mission, like when you're giving people that wheelchair, you're giving them a portion of their life back.
Yeah, we see it as 3 gifts. They get freedom, dignity, and hope. And it's up to them to put it to use. Okay, it's just like, you asked, what about somebody who's struggling, to make an offer?
Right.
Well, you got to kind of get out of your own way.
Right.
A wise person once said, do what you can with what you have where you are.
Right.
Because you never know where you're going to end up.
Yeah. What about these families? Like some of these
caregivers? Oh, my goodness. Yes. And I showed a video yesterday of this one mom. She'd been carrying her daughter for 20 years. Since the day the child was born disabled. She's never walked. She has developmental issues, and so communication is difficult. The daughter's 20 years old, got her first wheelchair. I don't know who was more overjoyed, the daughter or the mom.
Yeah.
And think about carrying an adult child.
What do you have any idea, and I don't know if you want to go here or not, we can skip this question if you want, but do you have any idea how much money you've been able to raise for Chair the Love?
Me personally, it's closing in on about $2 million.
That's incredible. How much money over the past 3 days?
$200,000 was raised at the Dealmaker event. And now, just by order of magnitude, so people can understand, a wheelchair costs $200. So we raised 1,000 wheelchairs, and the impact of one wheelchair is about 10 lives are impacted by that chair, because if it's a child receiving the wheelchair, typically they have a bunch of siblings. Who gets the most attention in that family? The disabled child. Now, if the child has, a wheelchair, the parents can spread their attention a little better to the other kids. Right. Plus, the other kids can take that disabled child outside, fresh air, sunshine, school, opportunity. Parents, obviously, they get a reprieve. Other caregivers, in some of these countries we go to, people live in little villages with 7 huts. They cook over an open fire. And that's the nature of life for them.
How do you think investors should prioritize giving?
One of the things that I have been promoting for years is called the Wheel Estate Challenge. Okay, instead of real estate, wheel estate, a little play on words. But I've got a bunch of investors that when they close a deal, they donate a wheelchair.
Interesting.
I've got a bunch of private lenders that when they do a loan, they donate a wheelchair. And as I mentioned earlier, we're looking for lots of people to donate $18 a month. But prioritizing giving should start up front. Okay? Probably the most notorious donor in history was in Scripture. And she was the widow that gave away 2 mites. Okay, a very tiny donation. But that meant more to God than the Pharisees who were, giving away pounds of gold because they had tons of it. She gave out of her poverty. And I've had a lot of people come and tell me, as soon as I'm making $100,000, I'm going to give away 10%. And my typical response to that is, only if we rip that check out of your cold, dead hand. Because if you can't give when you have a little, it's highly unlikely you're going to give when you have a lot.
That's very true.
That's one of the ways we lie to ourselves. Because when we give out of our lack, we're reflecting an abundance mentality. And that abundance mentality is like a discipline that actually serves us. Make discipline your servant, and your life gets better.
Right.
Without discipline, and I talked about that yesterday too. I thought when I was a kid, I'm going to grow up and I get to make all the rules. I'm going to eat ice cream for breakfast. Right. I'm going to have Oreos and devil dogs until they come out of my ears.
Right.
And wow, man, if I did that, I'd be dead by now, right? You know, but as a kid, you're not thinking straight. But a life without discipline is a chaotic life.
Right. What you just said reminds me of what I would imagine my father's biggest time of struggle. I would notice he would give more and more to the church. And when I was a kid, I never understood that. it still confuses me how he was able to do that. But I remember money was pretty tight, and he would never miss, cutting a check to the church every week. I also wanted to let you know that Peak Property Management plans to donate $2,000 today. So that's 10 wheelchairs to Chair the Love.
Oh, that's incredible. You may think that's only 10 wheelchairs, but realize this. If each of those 10 wheelchairs help impact 10 lives, that's 100 lives you just impacted. Thank you so much. I mean, that is awesome. I wish more businesses would kind of follow your lead, because for a business, that's a doable thing. But imagine if we had 100 businesses participate. So all you business owners out there, please follow Stephen's lead, because he's obviously a trailblazer. And I thank you very much, Stephen. It's a huge blessing.
We're very fortunate and blessed to be able to do it. And I'm very thankful for you for giving us the opportunity to donate to an organization like this, because we certainly can invest $2,000 into this, and just the impact that we see. Like, I watch the videos, I see the impact. I know people who go on these trips. It's unbelievable. And I look forward to doing a lot more in the future and getting more involved. And so I think this is just a start, but I'm proud to announce that we'll make that donation today.
Thank you so much.
What is next for you in business or with Chair the Love?
Well, I still own and operate a land trust services company, so we help investors with land trusts. It's called Commonwealth Trust Services, LLC. We have a small private lending business, so I'm still active. I also do some syndications, and I have some larger investments with some partners, because my time is really mostly dedicated to Chair the Love at this point in life. And so I don't have a lot more business aspirations other than bringing in more partnerships to help support our work at Chair the Love. God has blessed us richly, and we'll keep growing what we have so we can continue, to support our mission and ministry. But what I'm now looking to do is build bigger relationships for Chair the Love with other nonprofits, large nonprofits, where mobility might be a small thing that they are part of. Well, maybe we can become your wheelchair provider. Maybe we can do joint ventures. We're working with a number of churches now, and that's really helpful. It's bringing people on distribution trips so they can become ambassadors for us. I was even talking to somebody earlier today. They said, I'm not sure what we could do. I said, well, do you like wine? They said, yeah. I said, well, do you have friends that like wine? They said, yeah. Well, I said, we have friends out in California that started 20 years ago with these little wine gatherings. Everybody brings their favorite bottle of wine, and you do a wine tasting. If you're the host, you serve, some cheese and crackers and, a little hors d'oeuvres or whatever. And, after everybody has a couple of glasses of wine, you show a video that we can provide, and people can donate. And if you get one wheelchair, great. If you get 20 wheelchairs, better. And this has grown to where they've raised over $1 million in the past, 15 or 20 years.
Not surprising, yeah.
And so if everybody did a little bit together, we could do a whole lot.
Right.
That's like I was saying, at 100,000 families doing, $18 a month, in a decade allows us to deliver 1 million wheelchairs.
Right.
And globally, we need 75 to 100 million.
Right.
So it's going to take a little while.
Yeah, we'll get there.
We're working on it.
Yeah, you have the right community around you. Where can people find you? So we've mentioned a few things already. Do you want to roll through some different? So we have chairthelove.org.
Right.
And then where else could people find you? Social media, anywhere else?
Yeah,
That's a good spot.
I'm on Facebook. It's Augie Byllott, Byllott, and it's Augie with only one G, Augie. You can absolutely find me. Just Google my name, and you'll find ways to get in touch. But certainly, you can reach us through Share the Love, and on our website. I encourage you to visit and just check out what we do and where we go. And if you want to come along, love to have you. And my most common email is augiebyllott@gmail.com.
Awesome.
So you can reach me also, I think, augie@sharethelove.org, but Gmail seems to get through all the time.
Awesome. And your website is creatingwealthusa.com.
Yeah. We're in the midst of revamping that.
Okay.
So that may or may not be
Okay.
in great shape when you try to take a look at it, but we are working on that as we speak.
And then also yourlandtrust.com.
Yes, Your Land Trust, that's the Commonwealth. So CommonwealthLandTrust.com or YourLandTrust.com should go to the same place.
Okay, awesome. And we have these books as well. I'll put them up on the screen just for anyone who may be interested. And you should be able to find these at the website.
Yeah, the Financial Freedom Formula shows you how you can buy a house today, say for $100,000, and you can sell it tomorrow for $100,000 and make $100,000.
That's nice.
Oh, we'll talk about that on our next adventure.
Exactly.
And the other book is really, protecting your real estate investments, and that's a land trust handbook. Land trusts are a very cool tool for investors especially, but they're cool for everybody because they do not only provide privacy, they can help you avoid probate and help you to manage your wealth as you're building it, because nobody ever sues poor people.
Right.
Right?
Right.
So this is a way to hopefully, remove the target from your back.
Right. Yeah. Poor people are people they just can't find. Right. It's too hard to find.
Well, even if you find them, what are you going to get?
Right. Yeah. True.
Right.
Yeah. Exactly.
So,
any final thoughts? Are we up to speed? Anything else?
Man, we've covered a lot of ground today, and I'm really so glad we had the opportunity, Stephen. But those two things I said earlier, whatever you're doing, make it your signature day. Play full out and take effective action. And remember, God is always with you.
Augie, I'm so thankful that you made the time to come on the podcast. I've learned a lot just talking to you. I know our audience will too. Thank you so much for the impact you're making in communities across the world. It's insane, but also like the impact in our local community. Their lives are changing because of the work that you're doing as well. Thank you so much for what you're doing and how you're giving back and all the knowledge and information you're sharing. It was great to have you on this podcast, and I really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you, Stephen. It's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. Thank you.